Alright, hello everybody, welcome to chapter 3 of the Unreal Terrain tutorial. Here's where we left off with the terrain. Basically we have our satellite images masked based on the slope from World Machine. We can paint the layer ID and change that over in the paint tool. If we just left click, it adds the grass. If we hold shift, left click, it erases. And I've also created a new project and switched over to third-person view just for exploring the area, make it a little more kind of like an RPG or MMO. Thought it would be a cool view. So if you want to do the same thing, all you would go to is File and do a new project and choose a third-person template. So go ahead and do that if you want to do the third person. There's also a advanced vehicle template that's fun because you can drive around a dune buggy right on the terrain. One thing I had to do is raise the terrain up to the level of this little platform because somewhere in their little blueprint they have a kill plane, so if you walk off of it and fall too far you'll die. Okay, so let's get moving. Now we need to figure out how to make our material functions, the grass and the rock, look a lot better up close. The whole challenge is trying to find material solutions that look good from all distances. Right now we have the far read pretty much taken care of. Obviously using the satellite images helps that and makes a nice realistic terrain. What we're getting here with all these color variations and blending, that's something that would be really difficult in older terrain solutions where you're just painting a little swatch over and over again. Now, here are a couple textures I'm going to use. First, we're going to define the rock material. This is the satellite sand that I had started with. I darkened it up a little bit to blend nice, and it ends up looking more like a earthy stone. And we have two normal maps that we're going to use. This is one I created in ZBrush. I sculpted out a single rock and use the tiling ZBrush approach to kind of place it around and get a normal map. If you watch the architecture video tutorial series, chapter 5, you can apply that same process to create one of these. And then up close we have another detail normal map. So this is what we're going to see when we're very close to the terrain. And then this is kind of going to cover the medium distance of the rock detail. And this here is going to be what you see from far away. So we basically have this covered already. And let's go into our terrain and bring up our rock material. Remember, these are done with material functions, and that's so that we can use the material layer blend standard. This is the master material that we hooked up, and it references the functions. You wouldn't be able to do it if you just did regular materials. There's no way to pull those materials in unless they're functions. So we go to our rock function, and right now, remember, we're controlling the tiling based on a landscape layer coordinate node. I have this set to 256. The higher the number here, less it tiles, which is kind of backwards in my opinion. This is going to be our far distance tile. So what I recommend doing right off the bat, since a lot of these node networks we're going to have for normal, roughness, and diffuse are going to use the same coordinate systems, I like to have on the left and make a comment. So to do that, you just hit C with whatever device you have selected. Now you can move that in a group, and you can kind of change the size. So we'll put all our different coordinate systems over here, and we can even name this landscape coordinates. And we can even do sub comments here. So on this one, we'll call this far. I'm going to copy and paste this, mid, and close. This is something we'll be tweaking, but I'm going to start out with 32. And then close will either be 8 or 4. These are just kind of based on me doing a few tests earlier. All right, so now we'll go into our rock folder, and I'll just drag these textures over that I'm going to use. For each one of these, I'm also going to create its own comment, and I'll call it diffuse blend. So everything that has to do with blending the diffuse will be in this isolated comment or group, and the same thing here, normal blend. And then later on we'll have one in the center called Roughness blend. Now I do have a roughness map. We'll explain that once we get to it. So I always recommend when building materials, start with the feature that most defines that material. It's not like a linear process where every material is built the same way. Think of the essence of that material and start from there. In this case, I'm trying to think of how this actual rock kind of surface feels to the touch, and this, a lot of times the normal is the best option to start something. So we have this original, the kind of real chunky rock. We're going to plug that in to normal, and then we're going to use the mid coordinates as its tiling amount, and we'll build this and take a look at the results. All right, so there, now we have a rock normal tiling. First of all, I think it still tiles too much, so we'll adjust that. Oh, that's the issue. So mid was only set to 4. We wanted to try 32, I believe. Okay, so now it's tiling quite a bit less, but it's still not, it's not terrible as far as the resolution. Up close, let's go over here. Let's add our actual close detail and blend that in. So here's our material again. We already have the texture here. There's an actual new function called blend angle corrected normals. So we'll blend the two normal maps together and pipe the end result back to normal. And this way we can have the up close normal map tile a lot more. It's plugging right into the close UVs. So we'll build this and check the results. Okay, so now we see up close, by the time we get this at this distance, then we really start to see the close-up or micro normal map showing through, which lets us get away with both levels. And I'm kind of doing tests where I'm zooming, making sure there's no stage of it that ever looks too jarring. Now, one of the issues with the terrain, now we have some cool normal map information going on, but there's no real difference to the surface's roughness or smoothness. So now for our material to truly kind of behave correctly, we needed to mask those off. So let's look at the roughness map that I have for our rock material. The closer you get to white in Unreal is a rougher surface. Think about a cobblestone road or the edges around a kind of rock. Those might be worn down and smoother, so those are going to be darker. So if I wanted this to look like a real polished stone on the front surface, I could darken those pixels. So here's my final roughness map. It actually has two roughness maps. One is in the RGB channel here, and the other is in the alpha channel pasted here. So the up close roughness is right here. Now let's plug that in. We have this texture sample right here, but we need to make sure we're blending them correctly. So I'm going to copy this. So over here, I'm going to type in blend. And the cool thing about Unreal 4, they've made a lot of the blend modes actually mimic how Photoshop works. So blend, lighten, pretty much all those layer modes, you'll find them here. So we can plug these two in. V3 just means vector 3, which is like a 3 number coordinate. So RGB or XYZ would both be vector 3s. So you can use either for colors or coordinate systems usually. So we want to blend the roughness, the close-up roughness. We'll plug back down to these UVs. And instead of the RGB here, it's actually coming from the alpha channel. And that's because it's saved as a 32-bit Targa. So I save it as Targa. And when you do this, if you have an alpha channel, you need to make sure it's at 32 bits resolution. Otherwise, it drops that extra channel. Alpha channels, remember, just a way to store extra textures for use in game engines. And our regular roughness, this UV needs to plug into the mid because this corresponds with the same shapes from the larger rock here. So we want that to use the same coordinates so the details line up. Now we pipe that into the roughness. See, we've had nothing there, so once we build this and compile this material, it should start looking a lot more convincing on the rock surface. Okay, so now you can see the light behaves a lot differently on this surface, and the details match, the roughness matches the same features on the normal map, and that's really important. So if you wanted to further tweak it, you can go in on those roughness maps, and on areas that are supposed to be smooth, you can darken them. Areas where it's more rough, lighten them. So now we're getting some interesting results. Okay, so here's an example. For the most part, I like the scale of the rock tiling. I think it works well. But there's certain spots like this that are getting a little repetitious. So what I want to try next, we're going to expand this blending area a little bit. I'm happy with this blend at the very bottom. We're going to keep that going through everything. But at this level, we're going to do what's just a lerp, which is a linear interpolate. And we can lerp between two textures. Basically, think of lerp as a decision, a choice between two. Like it's choosing between A and B based on C. It's similar to what we used with the combiners in World Machine, the choosers. So we have this normal map that we want to use, but I'm also going to use this normal map, the up close normal map, just at a different resolution, just to break up the tiling here. So this is going to use the same UVs, but we don't have a way to decide between the two yet. So I made this quick and dirty black and white mask just to blend between the two normal maps. So we'll use that mask. Just drag it over. I'm just going to put it off to the side here. I might want to use that for other reasons. And we'll plug that right in. Eventually we can split this. Since it's just black and white, we can have different masks for each channel and plug them in if we want more variety there. Okay, so now it's going to use this mask to split between these two. And this mask still needs to use those UVs though. Okay, so this is the same area we're just looking at that was kind of repeating a little too much. Now it's really breaking up the normal maps and mixing between them. And that's the variety I was looking for on the surface. Basically, it saves us the trouble of having a ton of extra layers that we're painting with, because the material itself has the variety of the surface variety kind of built into it. So then you can actually get away with a map that only has really two material layers, grass and rock or whatever, because you're getting a ton of color variation from the satellite images, and you get a lot of surface variation just from the masking and the normal blending. So I'm just kind of walking around or flying around getting an idea for it. I can go to play if I want to see what it looks like from a weird robot man perspective. Okay. And I think it's off to a good start. And now let's tackle the grass. And we're pretty much going to kind of do the same thing here. So for the grass, this is a texture I made back on one of my, the Intro to Photoshop tutorial, made a tiling grass. So you can watch that if you want to see its creation. It's desaturated a little bit so that I can blend it with the color of the satellite image and have, so the kind of combination of both end up being the final color. And then this is a normal map, kind of taking, I think I generated some random noise in Photoshop and made a normal map of that, and also blended that normal map with just a normal map from the grass texture. It's not the greatest normal map, but it actually gets the job done. So this is what we're using. We'll plug these in now. So we have our diffuse close and our normal. We already have the other texture there. So for our blend, here we can use overlay, so blend overlay, another one of those layer mode blends, kind of inspired from Photoshop. I'm glad they did that, just kind of admitting the standard terminology and everything, rather than trying to reinvent their own kind of terminology. It's always annoying. It even says emulates Photoshop overlay blend mode. Lighter pixels become lighter, darker will become darker, and it doesn't wipe out, override any of the detail. So you can see now we have the green blending in with this green. But we need the coordinates from our close. I forgot to label that. Forgive me. I've let you down. All right. So already, if we build this, we'll plug the normal in, should get some lumpies. Okay, so there we have our tiling grass up close and our kind of lumpy normal map coming through, but we don't have our roughness. And for actually for grass, you can, as a whole, it's, if you think of it as a surface that's just broken up into tiny little shards and everything, like the blades of grass, the end result ends up looking actually rough, like a rough surface, because the light's just kind of scattering from all directions. So for a roughness value on grass, if you're doing it as a whole, you can try 1, completely rough. And the results are kind of realistic looking. There's also a lot of, in the starter content for Unreal, there's a example map that just has a ton of materials laid out, and you can look at how those are put together. And I believe on their grass example, they also just set the roughness to 1. Okay, so now it's all looking a little more convincing. But we could also use some mid-level grass normal map details, just random clumps, things like that. So I have another normal map in mind for that. Let's take a look at what it is. So this is the other normal map I like to use for kind of the mid-level normal on grass. This was actually taken from a World Machine height map. I believe it was an advanced Perlin, and you can kind of see the clumps and the steps to the details. And I just thought it, from a medium read, it looks cool, blended over. So we'll be saving this. Also, I had hooked up the wrong normal map for my up close grass. I found one that was a little crisper that I like the effect of more. So I just swapped that out. Here looks a little better. Now let's get our mid-level normal in. Again, this is going to be a blend, the blend angle corrected normal. And my far satellite image is 256, so we'll try this one at 128, just so we get a good range. And we'll build this and see how it looks. All right, so now we get these mid-level kind of clumps. That's looking natural. Up close we get the surface detail. And everything's kind of coming together now. Looking like a real terrain. So let's run around, test it out. Yep, that's some grass down there, I can tell. We're getting some cool just color variation, just from blending kind of the dirt, different levels of the dirt with the grass. These colors go well together, and that's because we chose them from kind of a part of the world on Google Maps that made sense, and the blending was, based on real reference. If you have things that aren't looking right or something feels off, it's most likely because you weren't basing it on any photo reference to begin with. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this so far. Now let's just talk about our options with our blending. Remember, right now it's just based on the height map from our landscape master material here. And you can go further with this if you wanted. You can actually try to line up the noise, the clumps at the same coordinate system as your grass up close, and try to get a more natural blend that actually matches. But on some tests I've done, I've found the advanced Perlin noise looks a little more natural here. Remember, we can still edit this. So if we go to paint, we can use the brackets to adjust our size. So if you just use a hard alpha, you're going to get a cleaner, harder edge right there. And if you hold shift, you can erase. So if we want to re-import our slope mask onto the layer info, you can right click and import from file, find your slope, and re-import it. So that just reset it. Now, if you do a lot of custom painting, you probably don't want to do that because you're going to wipe out what you've painted. But remember, if we go to the circle drop down, choose alpha, this is where I have that snow alpha that I like. I call it was just named it snow alpha because that's what I initially used it for, but it works for a lot of different things. It's kind of just this shape, and you can paint natural looking details like that and then cut away from it. So even after all of our kind of blending with the normal maps, like this is an area that might just look a little too noisy. So you can hit that with some grass and break up the tiling there. This is kind of the stuff I would do as a polish pass once I have the materials looking how I like them. All right, so I ran the actual build of the game now, the level. We could look at it in full screen and truly experience the world we've created. Majestic. There's things I'll see in context now, like some of the grass looks maybe a little bit larger than I'd like. Yeah. Here's our little close-up normal, doing its job. Good job, buddy. Okay, so lastly I wanted to show how you would add a third material, blend it together with the terrain. So I copied over my grass and made a snow variant, which just references tiling snow texture based on the satellite images and blends the two normal maps together. But nothing too fancy there. Important thing is it's a material function. So if we go to our landscape master, and this is initially what we had here, this network at the bottom, that plugged right in to our material attributes here. And what I did was I copied that whole network, and the result of our first rock and grass, that gets plugged into another material layer blend as the base, and then the top layer is the snow. And you do the same thing, you have the height lerp into the alpha, and I'm using pretty much the same Perlin noise at the same landscape coordinates, except my sample now, my layer sample is set to snow. And that just, as soon as you add that different layer sample, that shows up here, and it becomes paintable, and then you create the layer info with the plus button. It's not there now, but it basically is what you set to no weight blend, and you say okay, now that lets you paint with the new layer. The shader gets pretty complex, so you'll have to build, like I had to rebuild 700 shaders or so. Took a little bit of time, but once you do, then it's quick to iterate on again. So we can go choose our snow alpha and now paint with the snow material. Now it kind of might look ridiculous with this setting, but we have our snow material there. So you might do this, maybe it's snow, it could be a lighter dirt path. I wouldn't really recommend going too much more beyond the 3 layers, the base and 2 additional textures, just because we already have enough variety with our regular material blending and our just color from the satellite image. And that'll just save on how long it takes to calculate the shaders. Alright, I hope that gives you guys enough to run with and start making your own terrains. I intentionally wanted this tutorial to be bare bones and just the essentials. So with everything you can dive a lot deeper into these materials. You can do fun things with distance blending. Maybe I'll go into some of that stuff in a later tutorial. So thanks a lot, everybody. Adios.